And then it happened. Book 7, Chapter 4, When Girls Attack. It was a rainy, grey Monday morning just after announcements when our teacher stood up and said, "Well, I have an announcement of my own. You will all be happy to learn that I volunteered our class to put together this year's school yearbook. It will be a lot of fun for everyone." She beamed at us. I sank deep into my chair. I learned a long time ago that what teachers say and what students hear are two entirely different things. What the class actually heard went more like this: "You will all be unhappy to know that I am ordering you to put together this year's school yearbook. It will be a lot of extra work for everyone." As well, what teachers see is often different from what students see. I looked around the room and saw rows of grief-stricken students. Mrs. Hogsworth no doubt saw row after row of smiling, eager beavers. Next, our teacher organised the class into 8 separate groups and began handing out the fun. To my surprise, Mrs. Hogsworth let Gordon, Paulo and me form our own group. We were put in charge of photographing all of the staff at Danglemore Public School. She handed each of us a small disposable camera and told us that we should use our imaginations to try and make this year's yearbook unique. She didn't want the same boring pictures that were in every other yearbook. Gordon, Paulo and I looked at each other in surprise. Was she kidding? Did Mrs. Hogsworth forget whom she was talking to? She was actually giving Gordon permission to use his imagination on an important school project. For once, our teacher was right. This was going to be exciting. We decided that instead of taking the staff's pictures in stiff, formal poses, we were going to take surprise snapshots of the staff in totally zany, candid poses. We would catch the teachers by surprise and snap their pictures before they even knew what was happening. I was going to love this assignment. We plotted our strategy on how to take the funniest pictures. For 2 hours that night, we wrote down our ideas and formulated a plan. It was the first time I can honestly say I spent 2 whole hours on homework. Gordon figured the hardest picture to get would be of our principal, Mr. Evans, since he had no sense of humour at all and rarely did anything spontaneous or funny. We therefore decided to make the principal our first target. Early the next morning, Gordon, Paul and I snuck into the school to get ready. When Mr. Evans walked into his private office a half hour later, he found Gordon sitting in his chair with his feet on the desk. He was reading the principal's newspaper and an unlit cigar dangled from his mouth. Hey, knock before you come in here," ordered Gordon. Well, Mr. Evans turned the brightest shade of red and yelled in his loudest voice, "Gordon Smith, what do you think you are doing?" At that exact moment, Paulo jumped out and snapped his picture. "Thanks," he said politely. "We needed that for the yearbook." Mr. Evans sighed. "Oh, okay, kids, you got me. Now go outside and wait for the bell to ring." Our next target was the gym teacher, Mr. Sachs. Unfortunately for him, someone had discovered that Mr. Sachs's first name was Jim. Ever since then, he has been Jim Socks to the whole school. Jim Socks must have weighed over 300 pounds and was probably the fattest gym teacher in the history of gym teachers. Everyone in the school was used to the sight of the hefty teacher eating jelly donuts before, during, and between classes. We figured he ate about 24 donuts a day. In addition to being a big fan of jelly donuts, Jim Socks was also a huge fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think there's even been a bigger Leaf fan in the team's whole history. It was rumoured that gym socks failed kids simply for showing up to class in an Edmonton Oilers shirt. When our class arrived at the gym at 11:30, I peeked into Jim Socks' office and, as usual, he was eating a jelly donut and reading the hockey news. Paul and I went to the far end of the gym, and on cue, I yelled at Paulo, "Hey, Paulo, my dad says that the Calgary Flames are the best team in the National Hockey League." "Pwah, no way," returned Paulo. "My dad said that the Calgary Flames are the best team in the NHL." Well, it was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. Jim Socks snapped to attention, choking on the jelly donut he had just popped into his mouth. He leapt out of his chair and lumbered across the gym to where Paul and I stood. He shouted statistic after statistic to us, proving beyond all doubt that the Toronto Maple Leafs were the best team in the history of organised sports. As Paul and I listened to the teacher going on and on about his favourite team, Gordon went to work. Sneaking into Jim Socks' office, Gordon carefully squeezed out all of the jelly from the 6 remaining donuts in the box and neatly filled each hole with mustard. By the time Jim Socks finished explaining to Paulo and me how the Maple Leafs were the best team in the NHL and how our fathers clearly knew nothing about hockey, he was panting and sweaty and in desperate need of a jelly donut. He headed straight back to his office, dropped into his chair and grabbed one out of the box. He tore off a huge bite and chewed 2 or 3 times before the taste hit him. His entire face curled into the world's biggest pucker. At that exact instant, Gordon jumped out of the supply closet and snapped his picture. The photo turned out great. We quickly explained that we were taking candid shots of everyone on staff for the yearbook. Well, even Jim Socks laughed when we assured him that his 6 donuts would be replaced. As the week progressed, we surprised teacher after teacher and got great pictures for the yearbook. By Friday, the only staff members that we hadn't been able to capture in a funny pose were our 2 female custodians. We tried many times to surprise them, but they were battle-hardened from years of cleaning up after kids, and nothing we did could shock them. Finally, Gordon came up with a foolproof plan. We had noticed that the last room the custodians cleaned every day was a girls' change room. When school ended on Friday, volleyball practice began. Gordon, Paul, and I hid around the corner and carefully counted the number of players as they went into the change room, and then came out again for practice. There were 18 girls in the team. 50 minutes later, practice ended and the team filed back into the changing room. Another quarter of an hour later, we counted as the last girl left the changing room. We quickly ran up to the door and knocked on it, just to be on the safe side. No one answered. So Gordon called out, "Hello? Anybody in there?" He was answered with silence. "The coast is clear," he said. "Let's go." Taking one last look over our shoulders to make sure we hadn't been spotted, we ducked into the girls' change room. Clutching our cameras, we hid in 3 separate lockers and waited for the custodians to arrive. 5 minutes later, we could hear them coming down the hall. They were talking and giggling about something, but it was impossible to hear what they were saying from inside the lockers. A minute later, the door opened and they came into the changing room. They sure are making a lot of noise for just 2 ladies, I thought to myself. As planned, we waited for Gordon to give us the signal to jump out and startle the custodians and then snap their picture. "Now!" he yelled. All 3 of us burst out of our lockers, the flashes on our cameras going off, simultaneously together. And then it happened. Instantly, the room was filled with screaming, kicking, scratching girls. We had no idea that the girls' field hockey team from the high school used our field for practice every Friday afternoon. We never got the chance to explain about our yearbook assignment, Our cameras were torn from our hands and smashed to the ground. We were chased out of the locker room by a team of hockey stick swinging high school girls. Gordon, Paul, and I limped home to lick our wounds and to begin our yearbook assignment. All over again. End of chapter.